Good afternoon. It's great to be here. I was going to go to last year's and do a talk, but I had a mishap, so I think Dean had to do my presentation on event streaming.
What was the mishap?
I don't know. Forgotten now. Must have hit my head. Right. We've seen some great, well, I'm enjoying all the talks, 2 hard acts to follow. I don't have any code to change, so I'm not going to be able to match Carlin's agile development. That was a great demo of that. So what I'm going to talk about today is the topics to the kind of combination of event architecture and data in motion. So moving Jade out of your systems for different purposes, moving them to warehousing solutions for purposes of extracting running analytics and extracting insights. So that's one. Justin highlighted a couple of things that talked about we're improving interoperability features. That's an ongoing theme. The other one is simplicity. Jade's always been about making life easier for developers. So let's see what that means. I'm going to cover those topics. The first 2 are about what you can do now. The next 2 are looking at what's coming next. So that's more of a projected future, and hopefully it's aligned with your preferred future, or at least some of you. Right, I'm going to cover what's there now. A lot of you, not everyone, uses RPS as a means to populate a staging database SQL Server, and the goal of that usually is your warehouse of choice is SQL Server. You're using tools like BI, Power BI, and other analytics that run in that ecosystem. You'll be probably using ETL tools like SSI, so everything's running in that ecosystem. When that's your choice and you're not going beyond that, that's fine. What I want to say is our R&D focus is now on expanding your options and flexibility. So that's what I'm going to, with that in mind, we'll look at what's coming. So first one is, I'll just build that. I'm going to look at a scenario where you can use event streaming that you've heard about. Dean talked about it. Patrick's told you what's coming. So out of the box, there's scenarios that you can just get going straight away. So one of our enterprise clients has Snowflake that's used. So this is a big corporate with lots of applications. One of them is a Jade system. Snowflake is their enterprise warehouse of choice. They also have a Confluent Kafka deployment. So that's ideal. That's an ideal scenario for our initial event streaming release. Of course, they've got a Jade system. So the only thing really, they also got in-house Snowflake expertise. What needs to be developed is the consumer, and we provide a sample on our GitHub repo. So that's pretty much an out-of-the-box installation, get-go. If that's one of you, represents anything like your scenario, just come and see us. If you need help, I'll pretty much get going. Right, key here is, so streaming, what we're doing here in the current offering, we're streaming raw Jade events. They're pretty much a one-to-one from your Jade classes and objects. And if you don't have a complex model, so this customer is a fairly flat model, they've got keys they can use, natural keys in their data as well as OIDs, and they can use that downstream for creating entity relationships. So that even though you could handle those in Snowflake with tools like dbt, it's much easier. So it's a straightforward implementation. Right. What I want to do next is just give you a glimpse of the complexity that we want to solve with a proposal. And John Beaufoy, we've been working with Well, John earlier talked about how we've been helping with Skipton. I'll talk a little bit about one of the problems, so I'll move into that. This diagram up here is deliberately complex. You don't need to look at all the detail. I'm just going to highlight a few things. So one of the things that, one of the first things that Skipton approaches with is how to deal with object references. So when you get our events downstream, OIDs don't mean much. And the key to that, John talked about, is the first use case is sending customer information and related information to Dynamics to support their CRM. So in that scenario, it's not a full data warehouse. You don't necessarily have all the data. You have a partial view of the data, which then means if I want to look up addresses to relate them to the customers, where do I get them from? I could go back to the primary system or somewhere else, and then you start getting to the problems. So what I've created here is kind of a representation to show you some of the issues. This is another financial example. What we have on the left, I'm using a business transaction example. So on the left, we've got a simple event that's got usual things, Tran ID, amount, currency, and a timestamp, and 2 account references, so the source and destination account. And the key here is their OIDs. What we actually want is something that looks more like that big, wide, enriched event. And what you'll see there is we've replaced the OIDs with the natural keys of the account. So I've broken out source account, dest account, properties separately, and we've got the keys, things like org ID and account number. And then there are actually additional account properties like account type. So what we've done here is within the event, we've embedded accounts information. In a relational world, that's often called denormalizing. So we're taking flat objects and creating a denormalized event that's then more fit for consumption by events streaming processes. The other thing of interest here is down the bottom, you can see a group of derived or aggregate functions. So that's another one of our other customers hinted at wanting to do that. So the type of things you might do there is compute balances for a number of accounts, and they have to be correct at the time of the business transaction. So what we want to do is capture those at correct values in the transaction to send to downstream consumers. So that's just a quick color. So you can see this complexity there. And in our theme of making complex things simpler, that's what I want to show you with the next slide. And by the way, I'll just add in one thing since we've got the Skipton context of the CRM. The model there is something like a customer object has an array of addresses. So it's multiple addresses, the usual things like home, work, postal address, so several address types. You may want to, in their case, they probably want to embed all of them. The key challenge, though, if you think about it for Jade developers, is it's a collection. So you have to iterate the collection, and if you're going back to the primary for that most of you will know that's a potential for lock conflicts and potential deadlocks. So we want better ways to do it. Let's move on to the refinery. This is a simplified schematic, just so I can talk to some of the main points. The main elements of the refinery are shown in that green rectangle. So obviously this will integrate seamlessly with our event stream producer, but it is packaged as a separate license capability. So you can use it or you license it if you need the extensions. Otherwise you don't. A central piece is the mapping tool. think of it a way of how you map Jade classes to business events. So the idea is the mapping tool, it's a bit like if anyone who's used the RPS wizard, where you're mapping classes to tables. Here you're mapping classes, or indeed several classes, to this big event. So that similar sort of mapping, you're mapping properties to properties. You can do the same sort of thing, rename properties, reformat them. And the other one is that I've hinted at is being able to include your derived columns. So all of those require a knowledge of the Jade system and what the output event looks like. A key goal of the refinery is to enable non-Jade developers, so allow your data platform teams who know what they want the event to look like to use this tool without being coupled to a development cycle. So it's enabling data teams to be self-sufficient. And a key part of that is not to have a dependency on deploying anything into your development life cycle, because that creates friction. The data team, if they want changes, don't have to, they're self-sufficient. The artifacts are all independent. So that's about empowering. That tool will be standalone to enable that. Right, so the next thing. What does that enable? So the mapping tool creates some metadata and rules that's used by two engines. One is the reference capture engine, and that's an enhancement to our what's called change data capture. What we want to do is enrich the change data capture with sufficient context that we can build that event. So in the transaction example, we want to capture the accounts that are going to be embedded. They'll be captured in the transactional context, and that's the transaction on the database, in the capture file. The next engine is what I've shown as the transformation engine. That's an extension to our event stream producer. Its responsibility is to assemble those pieces, put them together, and create that wide event serialized to our JSON format. So they're both informed by the same metadata created by the tool, and the goal at the end of this is to output what I've shown as customers' transactions products. They're examples of business events fully enriched and ready to consume. On topics, and as you probably know, our solution supports at the moment targeting Kafka or Azure Event Hubs, usually not concurrently, one or the other. Right, and the goal there is to support a range of different sinks. So in Skipton's case, the first cab off the rank is Dynamics, but later on they're also looking at Databricks Lakehouse. So a key thing here that you might have picked up on is we do this transformation once. If you know what your business model is, you can end up creating and publishing business events that are suitable for multiple consumers. The advantage there is that you do it once, so it's not a point-to-point implementation doing a different transformation for each one. The investment is done once. And another great advantage is, so if in any of those, they may have sufficient data to look things up, but if you're a streaming tool, and I've put a couple of examples, Kafka streaming apps or KSQL DB, what they do is it supports processing the stream itself. So you're running analytics on a live event stream. The more context they can get in a single event, the better. So if your business event is fully self-contained, then that's ideal. There's There's a concept that we like to use here that in the eventing world, and it's called Event Carried State Transfer, or ECST. That captures that whole idea of self-contained events. So in our transaction example, we've got transaction accounted metadata and also derived columns. So that enables that sort of thing, stream processing. Right. I've put up three takeaways from here with some memorable terms. So we've got enrichment. Events no longer carry just raw changes. With enrichment, they include the business context, resolved references, natural keys, and calculated values, so downstream systems can use them directly. The second one is empowerment. That's about empowering data teams, making them independent. They can shape and manage events themselves without waiting for developers or being blocked by release cycles. The third one is accuracy. Every event is transactionally correct at the exact moment of the change when it happened on the source system. That means no stale values, no drift, and no guesswork for downstream consumers. Right. Data refinery. It's not just an idea, it's a committed strategic initiative. It's no longer a question of if, it's now a question of when. So the timing will be informed by once we define the MVP scope, and we're in discussions with some of our key customers to define that. Right. So what's next in an event-driven world? I'm not going to read that because I'll sound like a salesman, but we'll cover it. So far, we've looked at replication, streaming, and enrichment, but what's the next step in this event-driven world? It's not about Jade just producing events, but publishing and subscribing as a first-class participant. Let's have a look at that idea. Right, this isn't something we built yet. It's a concept that we want to, I just want to get this to this audience so that we can get feedback of where you want to go. What we've heard following the initial ESP that we've talked about, Event Stream Producer, a lot of people asked, what about Jade consuming events? So that's one aspect, but if you think about that, the producer using change data capture is very well suited to pushing data into something like a warehouse for reporting purposes. But what does it mean for a Jade system of record that's a business processing transaction? Do you really want a consumer pushing data directly into your database? Probably not. What you'd more likely want to do is have a consumer pushing it through an API. But having said that, there might be a case for having Jade as a participant in some way. And the most useful way is as a participant in an architecture where it's all symmetrical. So Jade becomes a publisher, maybe in a different way, and also I'll use the term subscriber. So you may sort of guess that's a very nice pattern that we've used in Jade a long time. Carlin demonstrated it with org, and it's been in Jade in the form of notifications. So if you've used Jade notifications as a developer, that's a pub-sub protocol. How nice would it be to have that working between not only Jade systems, but Jade and other systems? So that's what this is about. And Jade's about making things simple. So simplest way a good way to make things simple, where we've got what we want to do is interoperate with a range of different messaging systems. Each of the cloud providers have their own. There's Event Grids in Azure. Amazon have Event Bridge. And there's Kafka and Event Hubs are ones that you're familiar with. Each of these has different APIs and they have different concepts. So things where we're using topics for Kafka, there's other similar concepts, different names like channels and hubs. So what we want to do is abstract that, give Jade developers a single API, single set of concepts, and also use standards. And the best standard, or the most common one, is known as cloud events. So the idea is to use cloud events for the envelope of events, which means all of that's common across all of these. And the Jade event will be the payload. So that gives us our interoperability. The simplicity for Jade developers is they use a common API that works with all of them, and we have a provider interface. So what that means is we can develop providers for each of the platforms of choice as required. So that would be done on demand. You can do some of this potentially yourself right now by finding a .NET component, but you won't be able to use that directly in Jade. You need to do a wrapper. So again, this is about making it simple. We'll do the wrapping, we'll do the abstraction, we'll do the protocol, make it all easy. Right, so what happens next? What that gives you is the pub/sub protocol to what I've called topics. So that's the abstraction. Whichever of these eventing platforms will use topics. And then out the side, we've got the participants. Symmetric protocol, all of them can be publishers or subscribers. And they're the participants, so that can be things like microservices, analytics, pipelines, and even other Jade systems. So now Jade on the left or the right is a full first-class system doing pub/sub. And those messaging, the plugins I've concluded event, they can be streaming platforms as well as just messaging systems. So this allows you to do two styles of eventing. One's where you just pub/sub between platforms or any sort of participant, as well as potentially on existing streaming platforms. So the important part here, it's not just a one-way integration. With pub/sub together, we're closing the circle. It's a way of making Jade a consumer, but in a more useful way than just a consumer of streams. Right, so the themes here are simplicity. For developers, it's one API. Pub/sub works the same way everywhere. The complexity is hidden. The next one is flexibility. Because of the plugin design, you can switch or mix providers without, once you've written your code, you don't have to change it. It's just a configuration option. So you've got simplicity, flexibility, and seamless fit. So applications integrate directly into your event-driven architecture, working along microservices, analytics, and cloud platforms as true peers. In other words, simple to use, flexible to configure, and seamlessly integrated into your event-driven world. Right. As a final wrap, we've talked about two new initiatives today, and they're at different stages. The data refinery is a committed initiative, as we said. The event pub/sub is the concept phase. This is your chance to shape what that becomes, whether Jade is simply an event consumer or a full participant in your event-driven architecture. If either of these resonate with you, let's keep the conversation going. So especially that second one, we want your feedback on that. I'll be around during the mix and mingle, so if anyone's got thoughts on that straight away, then come and see me. Otherwise, have some time to think about it and get back to us. So that's pretty much it.